Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything rolls around Fantasy Premier League. But not today.
You're not going to introduce
My
yourself.
name is Serge.
My name is James.
This is what, 102? Episode 102?
It's the 102nd People's Poll podcast. The way you're talking is suggesting like this might be the last. Nico's waving his finger, is it not? 103rd, apparently.
Oh, okay. Well,
he's only been here 2 weeks, he knows more.
It felt like it would be good if this was episode number 100. Give the runners and riders, and I'll tell you what would be good if it's episode 100.
Okay.
And why you're not wrong that you said it's the last ever People's Poll.
This is just the last ever Planet FPL podcast, is it? The runners and riders in yesterday's People's Poll vote were the ongoing concern, and I've lost count how many times I've put this in a People's Poll vote, and it's still yet to win one, on concussion protocols in football. I think we're just going to do it on Patreon now because you lot end up not voting for it. NFTs, which I don't really understand properly.
Yeah,
I think they might be a problem. You sounded less convinced when I brought it up yesterday.
It's not that it's a problem, but I think we need to just put it in the right context and perspective. I mean, yes, it is a problem. Yes, there are problems associated with it, but there are some positives as well.
NFTs, football is definitely coming back to the table as a conversation for us, unless this is the end of Planet FPL. The winner of today's podcast is quite a simple theme and topic. It is a Q&A where we've asked for questions from yourselves on Twitter last night in response to the ongoing situation with Chelsea Football Club, because we did a podcast last Tuesday, obviously on the situation with Chelsea and Abramovich. And then Thursday morning, most people's chins hit the floor with the news of Roman Abramovich being sanctioned, and the game has changed again, and who knows, we might be doing Chelsea on the People's Poll again next Tuesday because the situation might change again.
It's moving fast.
Exactly that. So to timestamp this is Tuesday morning. I don't know what day it is. I don't really care. But we are doing a Q&A on off-field matters at Chelsea Football Club.
Yeah, but specifically off-field more than actually looking at anything to do with the team. The sanctions were announced on Thursday. More European sanctions have been announced. We covered some of them off on Friday. And I feel like it was so fresh as a discussion on Friday's podcast that I probably hadn't had enough time to digest my opinion on the situation. I'd had a number of interesting conversations with a few football fans, not specifically Chelsea.
He means West Ham.
Nah, it wasn't actually. I'm pretty sure it was a Gooner. But it was irrelevant who they support. But, well, it's relevant that they didn't support Chelsea, let's say.
If they're a Gooner, it probably was irrelevant,
It's irrelevant that they don't support Chelsea. It's relevant that they don't support Chelsea, but who else they support doesn't matter. But very adamant that you made your bed, now you've got to lie in it with Chelsea. And I thought it was a very controversial opinion at the time to be like, well, you know what, Sodom, because they've celebrated 20 years of Abramovich ownership and trophies and all the rest of it. Tough now. And perhaps they should have thought more about it at the beginning. And 24 hours into the news, my initial thing was, wait, let's not jump into Sodom, the Chelsea fans and what have you, because it's not their fault. But, and obviously football has a lot of good and does charitable work. And there's other things associated with a football club that's not just about the ownership and the fans and what happens on the pitch and money. So let's not jump into sod it. If it burns, let it burn, because for 19 years they've been accepting of Roman Abramovich's money. I don't want to jump down that opinion, but I suppose when you said, do you know? So when we come back to this, the last ever People's Poll, my thought eventually was, I know when I will stop podding now, and it's not when I'm going to stop caring about FPL. It's more likely that I'm going to stop caring about football as a sport. Like, I'm going to take the opinion that I don't need it in my life because I think it's morally bankrupt at so many levels and doesn't help itself in any way. And like, we talk about it on the pod, like, why do we throw money at our football clubs when they don't really care about us? And the more I looked at the Chelsea story, the more it made me think about the dozens of other sponsorship deals, ownership deals, and morally bankrupt things that happen in football that we don't ever speak out about and turn a blind eye to, from the amount of gambling sponsorship. I mean, Newcastle did speak out a lot about Wonga being a payday loan sponsor on their shirts back in the day. The fans did, to be fair, but still, that deal was allowed to go through. You've got the Saudis, you've got the Abu Dhabi guys, ownership, number of Chinese clubs owned by Chinese ownership now, and we let it all go. Gazprom with UEFA, FIFA, and the more I think about it,
go? Just clarify that.
Well, we are quick to jump on. Chelsea need protecting right now because they're part of society and they have roots in the local area and the good they do, and a football club has a role in society. But then doing that now after the cause is trying to solve. It's like the bolting the gate after the horse has bolted. We should have worried about the longevity of Chelsea when the owners were coming in by doing good, fit and proper persons tests and so on and so on. So it's all well and good. When the money's coming in, we're like, oh, it doesn't matter, you know what? It's just let's get the money in and grow and win trophies and buy players and whatever else it may be. It's not just about buying players and trophies because the Premier League as an organisation is dodgy in its own way.
Yep.
But when the proverbial hits the fan, it's like, hang on, this is a community club and we've got to protect it and we've got to look after it and we need to do special things for a football club because it's part of society and all the rest of it. Well, we should have worried about that at the beginning. So I think the problem is where we don't do anything about it. It's like when the shit hits a fan, we decide, oh, we've got to do something about it. At the beginning, we don't.
Is it not... And my start, I agree with you. I think like when we spoke on Friday, it was very fresh. I was watching the football Thursday night. The podcast was FPL focused. We threw 15 minutes on Abramovich. I too have obviously done some reflecting since then in terms of the allowing of, and this isn't just Chelsea. We've obviously seen the takeover at Newcastle, the owners of Manchester City and a few other clubs as well. You mentioned potentially got a bit, I mean, to be honest, most of the Premier League clubs have something dodgy about their ownership, if we're being really honest. So, the majority.
Yours, mine, all of them.
Tottenham's owner is a tax dodger, right? There's something in all of them, right, that's a little bit dodge. Not all of them, majority.
No, there's a handful that...
generally,
okay.
That's generally the smaller clubs.
Yeah.
But one of the things I reflected on is in terms of, and one of the arguments I've heard very recently is the idea that, and I think particularly relates to Newcastle, the fact that, and it's not all, the majority of Newcastle fans are quite happy with their new ownership. I think there's a lot who quite, and I think quietly in many have spoke out. I'm not saying it's all or none, but a large section have obviously accepted what they've got, the wealth they now have, and because of what they had previously with Mike Ashley, are actually prepared to run with it because of the greater good for their potential football club in the future. So to throw back the argument, one of the things is that I keep hearing is Chelsea fans haven't spoken up about Roman Abramovich and his ownership and the fact it was dirty money in the first place, yada, yada, yada. But the world is quite different now in terms of, I think, just people's, maybe it comes with age, people's general awareness of right and wrong is very different now to what it was in 2003.
Yeah,
and
massively.
Certainly in terms of social media, communication, etc. I mean, I can't recall, but I imagine when Roman Abramovich became the owner of Chelsea Football Club in 2003, the news story at the time would have been multi-billionaire takes over Premier League football club. I don't ever remember the news in 2003 being this money's dirty. Yeah,
you see, the irony is I lived in Russia from September 2001 to June I came back in 2002, literally a year and a half earlier, and was studying Russian at uni at the time. So everything we talked about was the post-communist era, how all the natural resources and everything had been divvied up by Yeltsin and his mates and what have you. So I knew that his money was dodgy at the time, but the majority of people wouldn't have.
Or maybe the majority of people did know and it just didn't matter. The headline was more about... The headline certainly over the last couple of years with Newcastle has been a lot of people speaking out going, hang on, not sure this is right. Not sure that should get passed off. There's certainly a case to be made that actually if the Newcastle takeover had not gone through 6 months ago and was still protracted, then maybe it would not be going through at all, partly because of what's now happened with Abramovich and Russia. All I'm trying to say is I think people's awareness will be far better now than what it was in 2003.
Of everything.
At what point? Yeah, exactly. At what point should Chelsea fans have gone, suddenly 10 years in, I realise now this is wrong, I need to speak up about it? That's all I'm saying. So, yes, there is certainly a case to say complicit. And what I have seen over the last 24 hours is Chelsea fans, and again, this is a minority, but on social media, which is never the best judge of a football club's fan base, we certainly know that, getting excited about the prospect of this £2.7 billion bid from another Saudi state group. Like, if that's what you want, I don't get it. I don't. The only thing Chelsea fans should be worried about right now is the protection of their football club, and they still have a football team next year.
Yep. It made me do full circle, and I'll signpost people. Did we do 51% as a people's poll or a Patreon? The German Bundesliga, 49-51.
Oh God, going back a while, we did fan ownership in Germany. We did look at it.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was People's Poll or Patreon. Search it. If you get it on People's Poll, lucky you. And if you don't, sign up to our Patreon. But
you'll have to go through a long list to find it. It was a long time ago.
We did look at it, and it made me think about that. This whole situation where if football clubs are important to society and the local community and all of that kind of stuff, well then. Let's prioritize that ahead of money. So therefore, change the ownership structure or go to this German model or what have you. Because we don't really, I haven't seen this other than Red Bull in Germany. You don't really get
no one here wants that, by the way.
No, you don't really. RB Chelsea, surely. You don't get.
I wouldn't rule it out at this stage.
You don't get the same kind of problems as you do. As you do here with ownership of clubs from foreign oligarchs.
What you mean?
Well, in Germany,
I mean, you're talking about foreign ownership. One of the things we concluded when we did that was that we didn't think that the fan ownership model could necessarily be brought in here, and maybe the magic wand wasn't painted quite as good as it is perceived necessarily in Germany in terms of the restrictions to some of the clubs in terms of what they can do. But obviously off the back of the Super League stuff, which is now exactly a year ago, sometimes it feels like last week, sometimes it feels like 10 years ago, there's obviously been this massive movement to obviously get fan involvement in clubs. And to be fair, I'm pretty sure Chelsea at the time were the first to speak out and said, we will have a couple of fan members be part of board meetings and stuff. Now, I don't know where that went. And it feels like something that's gone very, very quiet. But there is an interesting spin-off, and yes, we will get to some of your questions. There is an interesting spin-off in terms of the future of the football clubs and ownership, in terms of everyone keeps screaming for it. We've spoken about it before. Independent regulator, football governance that protects our clubs in the future. And we've obviously had cases like Bury, Derby. And that's what people think about. How do we protect these clubs? And the Derby County is still a big club, admittedly, in the Championship and possibly going to League One at the moment. But we did also speak about that at the time, about actually safeguarding the big clubs as well, in respect, in terms of what happens. One of the major flaws with what's happened with Chelsea right now is that Roman Abramovich owns 100% of the football club.
Yep.
Not even 90 or 95, 100%. And you reflect on that in afterwards and go... we've talked about, should Chelsea fans have spoken up about the dirty money? Why did nobody speak up in the last 19 years and go, what happens if something happens to this bloke?
Yeah,
who's got 100% control of the football club and it might be a little bit dodgy? That's a failure of so many people within Chelsea Football Club that nobody ever had to... Well, we're not saying the conversation didn't happen, but the fact that there wasn't a contingency that somebody had even 10% of the football club, where that person with 10% could possibly do something right now. The fact that Roman Abramovich has 100% control of the football club is why you're in that position now where you got sponsors suspending sponsorships and they can't even afford to take the free badge off of the shirt because they can't afford to make a new shirt.
No.
What?
What do you think is going to happen with the sale?
I think that a sale will probably happen quite quickly, subject to where the money is coming from.
As it stands right now, Roman Abramovich only owns the club in name.
Correct.
Really. If he's not going to get any of the proceeds of the sale, and he can't make any decisions because he's struck off as a director, and they don't have any money and can't make any money, then he basically is just there as, on paper, he owns the football club. He needs to transfer it to someone else.
Right now, the government owns the football club.
Yeah, that's the way it is and has become, right?
What I don't understand is, throw in a couple of our own cues, where's the money going to go? If someone pays 2.7 billion for the football, where does it go?
No, exactly that. I think that Abramovich could easily mount a legal case to say you can't just take my asset. It's still privately owned.
I think the football. I think one of the reasons why, because a lot of people were screaming, weren't they? And it was discussed in Parliament. I think Keir Starmer brought it up. Why has Abramovich not been sanctioned? And I think it sounds like the government did their due diligence to kind of make sure that if it did come to that and Abramovich did go down that route, I mean, he can obviously, he's got an army to do whatever, although could he afford to pay for a good lawyer?
Listen, he's still got money.
He's got money, but if he's sanctioned, but this way, there must have been, I think that's why it took it so long, they needed concrete proof that there was obviously links between him and Vladimir Putin, and the fact that he probably wasn't going to make an appeal, and if he didn't have a chance of obviously getting it overturned. I don't believe the government want Chelsea sanctioned at the moment. I don't. It's not good for.
What's the
for
difference between seizing Chelsea and then taking all his property? For example, he's got a couple £100 million of property in London. Why can't they just take all of that? Why can't they take any of his other companies or other investments or other stuff?
I don't know. I've not looked. As far as everything's frozen, right? Can he put the key in the door in his house? Or
I'm not convinced that the government will be able to sell the asset and not let him. He won't make any profit off it. I think his loans, he'll be allowed to take back his loans and so on and so on. But it's like, I don't think they can just seize it. I don't think they can. I don't think it's going to be easy for them to sell it and no money go his way. I do think he'll be looking to get his loans back out or whatever
there's
else.
This 1.5 billion figure, isn't there?
Yeah.
Is reported to be what Chelsea owe Roman Abramovich, because Roman Abramovich was essentially, and I think most of you have seen the figures now in terms of expected wage bill per week is in like 25 to 28 million. That's unbelievable figure, which suggests, and again, it's probably more serious than I first realised, that Chelsea are probably going to run out of money in the next couple of weeks, basically.
Yeah, I mean, they're negotiating with the government to try and change the parameters of this license.
And there's a chance that it will do.
Yeah.
What do you think happens to this 1.5 billion if he doesn't get it? Does it just get wiped, and therefore Chelsea fail FFP so badly that
this is the murky waters?
Yeah, where does it go?
I think the thing is, if what are the government trying to achieve here? They want to put pressure on Abramovich. Right? They want to exert political pressure. They don't want to just take all his money. I don't feel like that solves the problem or gets them to the goal that they want. Right? If they take all his money, they now have no leverage over Abramovich. It's like, fine, okay, you've taken it. Oh well, he can just carry on supporting Putin if he wants to or not or what. It doesn't put any pressure particularly on him. Watching Chelsea drop in value week by week by week by week. But he still owns it, is probably much more painful to him than just taking the whole thing.
But there's no way back here for Roman Abramovich at Chelsea.
No.
There isn't a circumstance where he could walk into Russia, stop the war himself tomorrow. They're not going to let him take back control of Chelsea Football Club, are they?
No. I from the reports that I have read, to be fair, he has been quite accepting of the situation. It is what it is, and he's done. Like, he's not trying to get involved in whatever happens.
Do you think he cares about Chelsea?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've had that debate with a few people. Saying that I really think he does care about them,
I think he does care.
Or at least certainly grew enough to care.
I think it's probably waned since he's not been allowed in the country as much and hasn't been to games for a while and stuff. I think it's certainly waned as he's gotten older as well.
Probably after having the successes as well, Champions League and titles and stuff as well.
So, yeah, I'm not... The deadline for bids is Friday.
Yep. That's why we're probably podding on this again next Tuesday.
150 interested parties is the number that's been thrown around, but whether or not they put bids on the table is different.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure but whatever happens will be different to what we expect it to happen. The government will do a deal or change the terms or accept it so that something goes through. Money always talks.
Are you concerned about Chelsea completing this season?
No.
Are you concerned about Chelsea?
No, the Premier League will.
Are you concerned about
sure
Chelsea
that it
playing
happens
next season?
No.
Are you concerned because you don't give a shit about them, or?
No, as in, I think they will. I don't think there's a doubt about it, but will they?
I don't know. I'm beginning to second guess the things that I thought I knew, and I think before Bury, I was always like, it'll be all right. I even thought that with them on the final day, as it proved to be for Bolton Wanderers on the same day. And this is different scale of stuff and completely different. But I think you and I are both of the. It's Chelsea. It'll be all right.
They're a big enough club with a big enough pedigree that someone with enough money to at least keep them running will definitely buy them. The feeling at the moment is whoever buys them is going to get them at a cheap price relative to what they're worth.
We're talking about this Saudi group potentially paying 2.7 billion. That's near enough what Abramovich wanted, isn't it?
Yeah.
So is it?
Well, how that looks, I would only want to comment when I see it.
I mean, in terms of speculating what the future holds for Chelsea is very subject to who comes in, what they want to spend, how much they can spend, whether they want to use Chelsea as an investment vehicle, whether they have to asset strip the club because they might not have the luxuries that Chelsea have had under Abramovich. I mean, that's all speculation until we know who it's going to be. I suspect a lot of them people bidding probably think, there's a quick buck to be made here.
Yeah, plenty. A lot of the American bids, I think, because they see sports much more from a business point of view in America than they do elsewhere.
Do you foresee the possibility that in the next couple of years, Manchester City or Newcastle's owners may be forced to sell the football club?
The horse has bolted.
Get that? But if football governance and regulation that gets passed off by government says you can not have ownership of your football club by a state, then could it be that Manchester City and Newcastle United's owners are forced to sell the clubs?
They would have to be. Obviously, they have this, like the PIF, right? The investment fund. It's not the state, it's an investment fund and all of that kind of nonsense. But if you scratch below the surface enough, you get to the
Well, they've
core.
Scratched it with Abramovich and they've got to this point. So I think if they scratch enough with them.
I think they can dress it up how they want. That's a really interesting question. I'm very torn on that. I don't think the government will do it. I think it would be question is, do I think they'll be forced to sell? I don't think they will.
But I think in Newcastle's case particularly, it would seem a little bit bizarre when they've just let them in. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's changed for you in the last 6 months? Now, I think the reality is the war on Ukraine has made everybody's awareness of these sort of things just greater, right, in terms of heighten. And it does everybody that says it, how can it be that everybody keeps saying about the war in Russia and nobody says nothing about Yemen? Mm-hmm. And all the hundreds of thousands.
Well, this
of people
is the thing,
died
right?
In Yemen. Why is it
are
different?
the government going to pass that legislation? But remember, the government are friendly with Saudi Arabia.
Well, yeah,
we sell them
weapons,
arms, and they
so
sell us oil.
So we're complicit.
So I can't see that situation arising. I just can't see it arising. I can't see City or Newcastle being forced to be sold.
So
I think the Premier League as an organisation is ridiculously powerful as well because of how much financial power they have.
But to the average person, it doesn't make sense. Do we understand that now? When we're looking at that now and saying, right, Abramovich is out of Chelsea because of what's happening in Russia, and yet we're letting these people at Newcastle in when what's going on in Yemen.
Yeah. It's a very valid point. You made a point about Newcastle earlier, which I didn't come back on, but I wanted to give a slightly different perspective. You said that Newcastle fans are accepting of the situation. Not all, but a lot are. But I think one of the arguments that many have used that I have seen is, if you want to call us out about it, you have to call out City and you have to call out PSG and you have to call out everybody else. But if you're not going to do that, then leave us alone.
That's fine.
But
that's what I'm saying. Now,
like
now something's happening to Chelsea.
It's like
And by the way, I'm using Newcastle because of the direct links with Yemen, and it's been spoken about. I'm like, listen, if this comes around and it goes for Newcastle, it will come for Man City as well.
Yeah,
it will.
You know, it's just that argument you have with I've got 2 kids, right? One's not eating his vegetables, and you say to him, "Go and eat them," and he's like, "Well, my brother's not eating them." I was like, "Well, what the hell's that got to do with you?" This is the argument Newcastle fans. It's just like,
this is why I'm only having one.
Yeah. It's like, well, they're doing it, so it's okay for us. Well, nobody should be doing it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, PSG, for example, PSG with respect, not my concern because I don't play in my country. There's nothing I can do about them.
No, you're right.
I think we you and I can't have any responsibility working in media to say anything about PSG. We can say, yeah, it's wrong. We'd rather but that's in France. That's a France problem. What's happening there? What's happening here now, I think, has changed, and there is a potential impact further down the line for Manchester City and Newcastle. Now, I don't know the ownership breakdown, and at Newcastle they've got like the Reuben brothers have got a certain amount of ownership and stake, so it's not 100% owned. I must confess, I don't know the situation in terms of the full ownership picture at Manchester City, but I think those 2 clubs would be very wise at this stage to begin looking at their model and what contingency plans are, because I think Chelsea fans, in the same way you said Newcastle fans, obviously have said, right, well, if you're coming for us, why aren't you doing something about Chelsea City? Well, Chelsea fans have now got every right, I think, from themselves to say, and I realise the circumstances are different, but they'd have the right to say, well, hang on a minute, so what are you doing with Newcastle and Man City then? And there is a knock-on to this, where people's consciousness and people's awareness, I mean, be honest, there'll be plenty of people listening who, until the last couple of weeks, wouldn't have even had a clue what was going on in Yemen. But because of what's happened now with Russia, Ukraine, Abramovich, are now aware. Yeah. That's the truth, isn't it? And then that's a problem with the way the media reports news in the first place. It's a wider scale. Do you want to cover some of these cues? I'm taking the words out your mouth, Serge.
I was going to say, where do we start? Because
how long have you got? I can't answer after these questions. You're going to do the question reading and the answer.
I'm going to read out Raghav's point first because he's a Chelsea fan, and I think it's fair to have some balance from the other side of the equation.
Yep.
Why is everyone behaving and trying to portray Chelsea and the fans as the villain, as if we have caused the war or something? Some of the hate on social media and articles by journalists has been, frankly, shameful and pathetic. Well, social media is not the wrong place to go to try and ascertain public opinion. I mean, journalists can be journalists, right? That's a very broad spectrum of people, from the Daily Star through to decent reporters out there. So he says, long may it continue. I've been listening to the pod from the early days, always loved the opinion and knowledge, not just on FPL, but football in general. Been intrigued on your thoughts. I don't care what anyone says or thinks, but that's my opinion on the way that we have been portrayed as villains, and with people praying for the club to be destroyed and whatnot. Shameful. Chelsea is a name with a unique place in English football history. I think that's the point being that I would argue the case that no one's blaming Chelsea fans for the war, and no one's blaming Chelsea fans for Chelsea Football Club for anything that's happened, but it's raised the question: should we have said nothing for the past 19 years? And we didn't.
As I said near the start, I think that the world has changed since 2003.
100%.
And perhaps if Abramovich, in fact, almost certainly, if Abramovich was buying the club as new today, I think there would be a very different reaction to what there was in 2003. At a point in time where essentially he saved Chelsea, where they were, had they not beat Liverpool on the final day of the season the previous year, probably, and then without Abramovich's money, probably would have ended up doing what Leeds had done for the 15 years or so in between. I have some sympathy for Chelsea fans, of course, absolutely. They haven't caused a war. Chelsea fans have every right, no matter what, to support the badge, the players within it, the manager, etc. I know that on Sunday at Stamford Bridge, Roman Abramovich, his name was, let's say, I wouldn't say sung, but it started up a couple of times, and Chelsea fans seem to police it themselves, which is good, because one of the things we said on Friday was you're drawing the wrong attention to yourselves if you do suddenly want some sympathy and are going to continue singing his name. The reality is, like it or not, the success that Chelsea have had over the last 20 years or so is in the main because of Roman Abramovich. So the success you've had is because of him. Whatever downfall comes next is also because of him.
Yep.
Like if Chelsea do end up in a position where they completely asset strip and end up, I don't know, let's say not a big club anymore, or it goes into the Championship or whatever, it's also because of Roman Abramovich.
Yeah.
So he's obviously got you all that success. He's now the problem. It's his fault.
I do think now as well, with foreign owners coming in with money, we are far more sceptical than we have been in the past.
Yeah, because our awareness is better.
The Saudis is a different kettle of fish because they've got so much money. Like Newcastle fans, it's like they're not just. It's not in the low billions. It's in the hundreds.
No,
of billions.
we're like 10 times richer than Man
But
City.
I remember being bought by an Icelandic billionaire and being happy about it at the time, because we were more naive.
Did you not get
back
suspicious with the fact his name was Eggert?
But this was post Abramovich, but it was the early stages of Premier League clubs being bought out by billionaires.
Yes,
and what it meant for us, what it meant for clubs at the time was the Abramovich model was success. What we thought everybody was going to do.
Success.
Money equals success, and we were excited by it. And that the wheels fell off that pretty quickly. And we've seen other scenarios where it's happened, right? I don't think Blackburn are particularly happy with the chicken farmers from India, but they're rich.
Yeah. They've done nothing for that football club, really.
Well, no, but they're rich. Then you see the Cronkies of the world. He's rich. They don't rate him. Glazers of the world. They don't rate him. So now there's as many questions coming in from, we could get another rich owner. Is that a good thing? Like in the old days, 15 years ago, we're getting a rich owner. We're going to win the Champions League was the mindset. So I do think you're right. There's a lot more awareness around. It's not, money's not a good thing necessarily.
But that's how a lot of Newcastle fans will feel now, isn't it? The inevitable kind of journey that Chelsea and Manchester City have had is that they're going to have now. And the reality is that is because of money, Suj.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing in terms of on Raghav's point, in terms of if PSG Football Club went out of business tomorrow, would you give a shit?
If any football club goes out of business tomorrow, I wouldn't care.
Wow.
If the reasons were bad management. But that begs the question, right? Where do you draw the line of who do you save? House of Fraser went bust. Mike Ashley bought it. Thousands of people lost their jobs. Who do you save? Do you save football clubs? Do you save a company? Do you save... where do you draw the line? So,
but
of
the
course
government
I would be sad.
I'd
be sad for the fans.
Chelsea
and the club
community
and
cultural.
If Bury goes down, I'd be very sad. If Derby were to go bust, I'd be sad for the fans and what have you. But if it's a consequence of numerous bad decisions, then you make your bed, you have to lie.
Is Chelsea, if that were to happen to Chelsea, is that because of numerous bad decisions, or is it because of the actions of one person? And then is everybody associated with Chelsea, including the supporters, complicit with it?
Where's the accountability, is my question to you. Who's accountable for the governance of a football club and football clubs in general? Who's accountable for the behaviour of Chelsea or the behaviour of West Ham or the behaviour of Spurs? Is it the Premier League? Is it the FA? Is it the owners of the clubs themselves? So where's the accountability? So yeah, is Abramovich responsible? Yes, but he needs to be accountable to someone else. Because football clubs can't do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. We put certain regulations around football clubs, like FFP.
Do you think a lot of football fans in this country would be happy if Chelsea went out of business?
I don't know if I'd call those people football fans. I'd feel that there'd be fans of their own clubs that want the best for themselves,
one less person to be in the way.
Football fans who love the sport of football and the pyramid and everything that English football is about would not want Chelsea to go bust.
No,
we wouldn't want any club to go bust.
I do not want Chelsea
to go bust.
But to answer Raghav's point in terms of being vilified on social media, say, yeah, you are going to be, mate. Deal with it. You're a big club. You know, things that annoy us, right? Really, really annoy us when we watch, say, Manchester United playing the Champions League and the commentators are biased to Manchester United when you know that half the people watching that are desperate for Manchester United to lose. No, call the football match as it is in the middle. And it's a little bit like that. Of course, you're going to see your own side and your own version of events as a football fan of your football club. And of course, that's right. But yeah, you have to understand there's a lot of people out there that do want Chelsea to burn right now. And if it was the other way round, and maybe in a year's time or two, and it's people want Manchester City to burn, it'd be the same. Exactly what you said, Suj. Football fans in their fandom moments, the rest of the world burns if it's good for me, basically.
Yeah,
that's how it works.
Yeah, so I wouldn't call them football fans. I call them fans of their clubs.
Well, yeah.
You asked me a question around government taking ownership of the club or banning state ownership of football clubs. What has actually happened since the Super League breakaway a year ago?
What's happened?
Yeah. Fans, what rules are there now?
I think what happened is that in terms of like rule changes, nothing yet.
So
but it's coming. It's coming. I don't know how far that's going to go down the line in terms of, are we going to ban states? I don't think that ever would have been on the table. But I think it's something that might be now because of what's happened in the last month or so.
I think that's an indicator of how quickly any other change in ownership rules and the way football clubs are managed and run will happen. Like years. We're talking years. We're not talking weeks and months from now. I think we're talking years for anything to happen.
What, in terms of governance?
Yeah.
No, it's coming soon.
For the Super League or for club ownership?
No, I mean in terms of an independent regulator for football in this country. It's coming soon. It has to come. There can be no more delay on this now.
I don't think it is. I think
I disagree. I think
regulators
it is
are very powerless, generally. Stian says, who's a Chelsea fan, his ultimate fear is that should the wrong owners take over, we'll be in time stripped of our resources and become no more than an opportunity to make a quick buck rather than continue to build a legacy of what we could be. Do I have reason to be concerned or am I paranoid? What does it matter?
I think Chelsea fans, the only thing they should be worrying right now is the immediate safeguarding of the essentials.
Just be glad you got a football club to start with. That's my opinion as well.
That is the number one thing, because that is the worst case scenario right now, as extremely unlikely as it is. The worst case scenario is that Chelsea Football Club go out of business.
Yeah.
That's the worst case scenario. It's like people saying, well, is Rudiger going to leave in the summer? Like, you stop worrying about shit like that. There's more important things going on. It's impossible to say till you know who comes in. As we've discussed, there's every chance that whoever comes in is going to use Chelsea as an investment. And then it may not be the same as what it's been in terms of a power. But it will probably still be in a very good position because of the size of the football club, the quality of the squad, the youth system, etc. Liverpool haven't, I know they have recently with Luis Diaz, haven't overly kind of spent beyond their means as such to get Liverpool to this bastion of a football team that they are now. So it doesn't mean that even if someone comes in and uses an investment, it can still be successful. Look at the Glazers at United. I know you can debate whether it's successful or not, but actually, the Glazers have spent, well, certainly in terms of transfer spending, and we know they've pulled a lot of money out of Manchester United. United have spent more money than anybody else in Europe over the last, and therefore the world, over the last decade.
So, Amber says, how are sponsors like Three have pulled out? Who else has pulled out?
So they haven't pulled out. They
just don't want their...
It's Three and it's Hyundai are the main two, who they've suspended their sponsorship of Chelsea. Hyundai's deal is going to expire at the end of the season anyway, and it probably wasn't going to be renewed. Freeze, I think, runs till 2023 with an option should both sides want to extend it for a couple more years or so. The problem is, and this bit of it is quite laughable at the moment, is Free don't want their sponsorship on Chelsea's shirt right now, but Chelsea legitimately cannot print a new shirt.
Yeah.
They can't do anything. There's nothing they can do. So at the moment, the sponsors still sit on the shirt.
Amber wanted to know what the relevant clause is in the contract that allows them to do it. Well, who knows? But
What,
obviously,
suspend the deal?
bringing the brand into disrepute, that kind of thing.
Well, that's where it will link into like players, and we touched on it a little bit. So, and of course, we have to remember here as well, it's not just a men's team, right? And we've spoken about Thomas Tuchel a lot recently in terms of how well he's been handling himself. The same completely applies to Emma Hayes and the women's team. Where the real problem will begin in the immediate for Chelsea in terms of on-field stuff is the moment comes where the money's not in the bank and they can't pay players' wages. Because then it's same thing. Then it's breach of contract, and then potentially, subject to what the detail of those contracts are, potentially players can walk away for Chelsea from nothing if their contract's been breached, right? Then you've got an on-field problem that's massive.
FPL Gatsby's got a question.
Sure.
Most of the other questions, actually, James, I've been through are really...
So we've done a Q&A and we're going to cover 3 questions.
Around the equivalence of Saudi... It's basically...
We're such a stitch-up.
50% of the questions are around Saudi Arabia.
Really?
Yeah. I'll read some of them out so we can... We're not just going to do one more. We'll do a couple more. But
go on.
Gatsby, if you were Tuchel, would you leave at the end of the year regardless of the outcome?
No, arguably the opposite. He's probably got a real inner strength and bond for his players, the actual football club. I mean, I think he said he's only met Abramovich once, which was like the Champions League final and stuff. So his commitment to the other people at Chelsea, like Marina, Bruce Buck, Peter Cech, the players, the bond that's probably grown quite a lot over the last couple of weeks, I think, with the football fans as well. So, no, it's not a... Look at Rooney and Derby, right? He could have walked out and taken the evidence. I'm not leaving them in this shit now. And I think Tuchel comes across as very principled. I think all of us have admired the way he's spoken publicly over the last couple of weeks, which has been really difficult. I don't think it's a given that he would just look at it and go, this is shit for me. I've got to walk out and actually sit tight. And 18 months, who knows, Chelsea might in 18 months be in a better position than they're in now. Obviously than now, but say 6 months ago or whatever.
Jimmy Claret, who is, James, the leader of the Northwest's Planet FPL Supporters Club.
That's correct. Do you want to hear something funny about that?
And he loves Azza as well.
Really off topic. The missus goes to me the other night. She goes, why am I not part of your Planet FPL Supporters Club? So I had to tell her it was a bit of a stitch-up story. Go on.
If my missus said that to me, I'd send her a link to our Patreon. So this is how you join. So I'm going to... Jimmy's question. I think he's trying to get us to talk about a different topic, James. He says, will this damage the value of my Chelsea NFTs?
No, he obviously wanted NFTs instead.
Yeah, it'll come, Jimmy.
Yeah, it probably will.
Right, I'm going to give you a bunch of questions and I'm going to abbreviate them just to prove a point here.
Okay, fine.
Steve McInnes. How can the Premier... would love to know how someone can square this for me when the Premier League are welcoming the Saudi owners with open arms.
You're definitely a Chelsea fan.
FPL Drog. How to negotiate between the whataboutisms of ownership, talking about Saudi Arabia, China, USA, and all of these other clubs as well, saying, how can you? We have a question coming here from FPL Finding Glory. In 10 years' time, will we be having the same discussion about Newcastle United? Nasser Kamali, rumours of a Saudi media group buying the club. Is it fair for them to... what happens considering the investments of PIF in other Saudi businesses? Like Saudi Arabia, Saudi specifically, is the most used word in all of the questions.
But that's what I'm saying. So it's interesting that because of this is what's happened. That's what I said. It has raised again people's awareness of Newcastle and Manchester City, and not just those two clubs. You mentioned PSG, other clubs as well. You know, the Villa have certainly had a bit of dodgy ownership. I was mentioned about Tottenham and Joe Lewis, and he's a tax dodger, right?
Well, yeah,
they're all
he made
dodgy
his money
in their own
from
way.
the run on the pound in the 90s, and the government lost billions on that, which was whose money? Our money, tax money.
Yeah.
So we own Spurs, is that right?
I think everyone owns Spurs, especially on a Tuesday night away from home.
My owners made money from the porn industry, mate.
Exactly. I got nothing to add to that, mate.
It's just, this is the thing now.
This is what I mean about.
I'll add one thing. What Joe Lewis did when he made money on the run on the sterling and what have you, he's not breaking any law. What Gold and Sullivan have done in their business dealings is not break any law specifically. So we can call them out for saying it's not right or what have you, but they haven't specifically broken any law.
Someone's going to find something. I'm sure Joe Lewis has broken some laws.
Probably. Or bent them at least as much as possible. But
I think there's...
Again, you have to draw a line where what's morally right and what's legally right aren't always the same.
The other knock on, and I'm going to talk about my own club a little bit now, Tottenham, where there is growing fan unrest in terms of Joe Lewis, Daniel Levy and Enick, who own the football club, and in terms of wanting them out. And this whole Russia, Saudi Arabia thing does make me think, like, we've been linked with some guy from Singapore, supposedly went to a Spurs game in December, might be interested
his first game and now he wants to buy the club.
Might be interested in investing. That's all at the moment. But you do think about this more and more, and your instinct is like, oh, someone wants to invest in my football club. That's good. But I think the first instinct for all football fans should be, who is this guy? Why does he want to do it? What is his money? And what's the colour of the money, essentially? And I think we're probably in a place now where, like, I don't want, and I understand for Chelsea, Newcastle fans, whomever, the uncomfortable feeling of not agreeing with the way your football club's owned, still wanting to love the badge, all those things. I don't want to feel like that. I don't ever want to have that feeling where I know that the owner of my football club is principally wrong and there's nothing I can do about it. And I'd rather just have Daniel Levy forever, I think, as it is, rather than have that mind fuck and, okay, yeah, great, I win a league title or something and it feels dirty. And I'd rather just be Tottenham Hotspur, I think.
I had this situation this year, mate, with Kretinsky, in that as soon as he invested, the articles in The Athletic and other places straight away were... I couldn't tell you off the top of my head now, but where did he make his money? And everything was broken down. He worked at this place, he was an investment banker, made this much money, then was invested in to go and start his own hedge fund, did this deal, made hundreds of millions, turned into billions. That's how he's got his money. So they're very transparent.
Till you find out the first million was a loan from Putin.
Nothing would surprise me now. But we have a lot more transparency on where the money's coming from. So let's loop it back around to the point I was making at the beginning, was that football being morally bankrupt and me not caring about football because it's going to keep descending down this path of just a sports washing and being dominated by just who's got the most money, is going to make it a less enjoyable sport to want to be involved with, to watch and to care about, because it doesn't align with my values or whatever else. You think that an independent body will come in and we won't ever get to that point? That was a question. I didn't phrase it like a question.
No,
so
I do
because
believe...
I don't want to not care about football. I'd rather care about it.
I do believe that football governance is coming. I really do. I think it has to.
It will come at a cost.
Which you think is?
Well, there'll be less money swirling around.
That's not necessarily a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, but for some people it will be.
No, I get that. And in terms of complicity...
I'd be happy for less money if it was...
In terms of complicity, like in terms of the rich... loop again, Suj, Super League, right? No Super League starting. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus can do whatever they want. A Super League does not exist without the English clubs, and the English clubs ain't going back into it. Right? So it's a non-starting. We put that up as a topic last week. It's a non-starting event unless it's something that legitimately completely competes with and is open and fair competition to compete with the Champions League, whom of which, as discussed, their rebranding of the Champions League from 24-25 is absolutely abysmal and awful, and I don't think will stick for long. Other than its 3 or 4 year cycle, and they'll end up having to change it again. And then on that next cycle, you might find a competition that competes with the Champions League where they all want to be involved, and perhaps run their own side of the TV money and the prize money and all that sort of thing, yeah, maybe will. But right now, it's not on the table because the English clubs ain't going. English clubs ain't going because they know in terms of that the fans are just not going to have it.
Yep.
Fans now feel off the back of what happened last year a voice. In terms of the strength of our league, to link it to the Super League, the power of these English clubs is unbelievable. Right? We'd say how many of the top 20 richest clubs are like Premier League clubs? Like 14, isn't it? 12 or
even
14.
We're in there.
Right? You're like 12th or something like that in the world. And when you actually sit down and think about that, and I'd said to a West Ham fan 30 years ago, in 30 years' time, West Ham's going to be the 12th richest club in the world, hypothetically. And you're roughly about that, right?
Yeah, I thought a bit lower, but yeah.
How many trophies do you think you'd have won in that point to get to that point? We ain't done nothing, right? The same as my club's like 7th or 8th or something. It's not really done anything. It's the power of the Premier League. And we all love the Premier League in terms of the great players we watch, etc. But the amount of money, and some of it a lot dirty, is part of the enjoyment that we watch every week. And therefore, it makes every single one of us responsible in some way to... Because, you know, I buy my tickets and I go to the games, or you sit at home and you pay for your Sky subscription or whatever. Then all of us in some way contribute to some of the dirty money that's in the Premier League.
Did we? You mentioned before, and I haven't seen Gary Neville at MNF. Was he making a similar point?
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic last night.
He literally
had
Sky Sports and
a 3-minute speech or so talking about football governance and stuff. And he was very honest and said that his own understanding of, you know, the Abu Dhabi group or PIF going into City or Newcastle, and the fact that he thought kind of the money generated into the league and the idea that yes, sport washing, but actually working within football, particularly in community country like England, that we City, for example, have done a lot in terms of the regeneration of the East End of Manchester and stuff. Like it's not all bad. There are some good things there, but then someone's straight away going to go, yeah, but James, that's what sport washing is. And at that point, I go, yeah, I can't really argue with you, but there's always the hope, and this is what people always say. Well, if PIF go and work with Newcastle, then hopefully Saudi Arabia will change some of their abhorrent laws and stuff like that. Well, until that does happen,
yeah, we shall see. I think that's it. That's a wrap for today. A lot of
it just could go on for hours quite comfortably,
to cover,
couldn't it?
And there's clearly a lot of differing opinions on this subject, and we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll be talking about it this time next week. I mean, we'll be talking about it at some point anyway when the ownership of Chelsea changes.
When do you think, and do you think a sale will happen?
I think a sale will happen because they've kind of basically said that he's not getting any of the proceeds, and so there's nothing stopping a sale happening unless legally he challenges it and they can't just take the club and sell it and not let him have any money. And if that happens, then he has to just hold on to it, and the value of the club will decrease the longer these sanctions stay in place. Who set the deadline of this? Bids have to be in by Friday.
I don't know. I don't even know where that date came from.
Yeah, so if it's being driven by the government, I think it will happen very quickly. If it's being driven by Chelsea, then I don't think it will happen particularly quickly, i.e. the summer.
I'd tell you what, the way the government works, I wouldn't. Not that it should be the biggest concern for Chelsea right now, but if they're choosing the preferred bidder, I mean, it could be Mickey Mouse, couldn't it?
Well, a Disney corporation.
Literally could be Mickey Mouse.
All Chelsea games for next season available free to view on Disney Plus if it is Mickey Mouse. We're back at you tomorrow with Sky Fantasy Football.
Yes.
Another
disastrous night for me last night. Yeah.
It was just this whole last 12 weeks has been standing still.
Yeah, well, I've tried to deviate and it's not well.
It's not going anywhere.
I had to try.
But there's only good news. There's only about 8 or 9 weeks left, game weeks anyway. So
cracking.
We start again.
Cracking COTC on Thursday to come with Bradley and Andy previewing Wolves Leeds, which I recorded with the guys last night. There's some stuff in there that I think is going to surprise in terms of particularly some of the stuff Bradley says about Wolves assets for the weekend's possibly going to scare a few people.
Nice. Stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you are listening to the pod. And if you're interested in joining our Patreon, then patreon.com/Planet FPL. Other than that, stay safe, look after yourselves, stop the war.
Stop
Get
the war.
vaccinated.
Get
Ciao for now.
vaccinated. Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man child.